Here on the bench today, I've got one of these. It's a Seiko Elnix. So far it has been stripped down to its date wheel. The day wheel has been removed. This is secured in exactly the same fashion as all of the Seikos that you know and love, with the little C-clip, which just pinged out of my tweezers there. And looks much like your typical day wheel. The dial is held on by a couple of eccentric screws on the back, just like the 7009 series. And the dial side layout is very similar to many mechanical Seikos. Obviously the bit we're interested in is, if I can get this to behave, is this bit at the back here. And we're going to see what makes it tick, as it were. But I figured I might as well go the whole hog, and we'll give it a bit of a strip down. I just want to show you this, however. This is the balance wheel here, and I'm going to have to, in fact I'll zoom in on this one. Here's the balance wheel. You can see like so. And, or the balance cock rather, and there you can see, if I can focus on that, the balance wheel is actually made up of two halves with a magnet, or something like a magnet, because there's a coil in there sandwiched in between, and that's obviously what gives the impulse. Very interesting. So of course we will see more when we get deeper into that. And just before I start disassembling on the dial side, I'm going to get in really close and show you the pallet fork, which is up here. So I just need to raise this up and focus for you. And you can see that it has a pallet fork and escape wheel of sorts. I'll just try and put a little bit of tension on that, but with very long pallet stones, which you can see down here through this slot here. And these pointed teeth that you can see are the escape wheel. Hopefully when I push this back in, there we go, you can see a little bit of movement there. So that's a brief look at the timekeeping side through the windows that we can see. And you can also see, that's a good time to point this out, one of the problems we've got is a very badly off-centered hairspring. As you can see that's not centered at all where it should be. We've got coils, all the coils bunched up on this side and touching, all the coils on this side very loose, like so. Let's get that in the frame for you. So all this whole thing needs to move over, and we'll need to do a little bit of hairspring manipulation for that. As this one is new to me, this video hopefully will serve as a very good and handy reminder of where everything is placed. Just wondering if I can remove that balance. While that's all in place, I'm going to see if I can to save causing that any more damage than it has already. That's interesting. It looks like I will need to remove the electronic board components first before I can lift that balance away, because I can't wiggle that out from around it. So let's take off the battery clip. Have 3 screws. It's an odd combination of fastenings, but 3 screws securing the electronics in place. So all of the same length and type. Now in theory this board should come away. It does indeed, and there we have a very small circuit board with some components. The 3 screws, as you can see, are for 3 contact points on the plate which goes between the balance wheel, which has the magnetism. So obviously these presumably direct a pulse in opposing directions. That must be what that's for. As for what these components are, I couldn't tell you exactly, but you know, they are components, I know that much. As already mentioned previously, my strong point is not electrics or electronics. So whilst I am okay unbolting them, for example, I'm not so good with knowing what they do, however. So we've got another screw for that board there, and is that then free to come out? Oh, it is indeed. So that there, if I can get that to focus for you. Right, let's zoom in and show you that. Here is the board that sandwiches, that sits between, it's the filling in the balance sandwich. And as you can see, what we've got is a coil of very fine copper wire, and then the contacts on that. That, along with the other board, is going to be put to one side. And then you can see accordingly here, if I can Get that to focus for you. Here you've got the balance which I can now remove, which is essentially a sandwich of plates. That one looks like it has magnets embedded into it. I can't, I'll need to have a good sort of close-up look. And the lower one looks like it is made of brass, whereas the upper one looks like it's made of steel, so, or some kind of metal, white metal alloy. So I can now remove the balance. So which is good, because with the balance removed I can get to work on the dial side, disassembling it without worry of doing damage to the balance wheel. I always like to remove the balance cock where possible. So that should now just lift clear, as it does indeed. So the only thing that you need to do with this is obviously make sure it's engaged in the horns of the pallet fork. There's no safety roller pin, presumably because the oscillation is controlled by the pulse, or the magnetic pulse, or whatever it happens to be. So let's take a look at this balance. I'm assuming this balance can be washed, much like any standard balance, but before I throw that through the machine I will try and get a little bit more information on that. But there's the lower part of the balance, and it's got an impulse jewel, much like you would find in any balance, but without the safety roller table and the corresponding part on top of the guide, the guide pin on the fork. So sorry about this, it's could do with somebody to be operating the camera at the same time. So so yeah, that's the rather unusual balance. I'm assuming looking at it that it can, the whole thing can just be refitted to the plate and put through the machine, as I would normally do with a standard balance, but I do need to do some corrective hairspring work on that first. So you can now see the unusual escape wheel, looking kind of like a vicious circular saw or a ninja star, throwing star. Interesting stuff. So I'll plate there. It's quite extensively jewelled. I noticed on the train side there's actually a good number of jewels, but that's good. I can now flip this over and actually get to work on stripping the dial side. And I forgot to press the record button there, but all I've actually done so far is just unscrewed these 4 tiny screws, which are on the day-date wheel jumper plate. If I can get that to disengage from my tweezers. Thank you very much. I don't know if these are magnetic or sticky. Possibly slightly magnetic. Okay, and that's the day wheel jumper spring. The date jumper spring comes complete with ping spring or shepherd's crook spring that you can see right there. I'm going to take care of that first and foremost. These can be buggers. For anybody who knows, they will hop out at a moment's notice. There's an awful lot of oil in here, which is not going to be doing anything any favours, I can see. But so far that's looking very run-of-the-mill. So I've got another small plate here which holds the teeth of the date wheel. Brass tweezers. There we go. They're not magnetic, they're sticky, unless my brass has suddenly become magnetized. So yeah, that would explain it, because there is an abundance of oil floating around, and this plate actually has a jewel fitted to it. So that's interesting. What is that fitted to? I need a better movement holder for this one. Well, certainly while I'm on the dial side of it. That. I'm not sure what that is, but as you can see, there's a jewel. Is that in focus? Nothing like. Well done you, me even. Try and get this in focus for you. In fact, I'm just going to zoom in on this bit. So here you can see, hopefully, if I tilt that pattern there, that's not pretty patterning from the factory, that's swamped in oil. It's absolutely caked in oil. If I just get an old piece of Rodico here, get that back into focus for you. And you can see that's now cleaned the majority of that off. Absolutely caked in oil, this. So that's certainly not going to be helping things. It's feasible, it's entirely feasible that a previous owner gave it a bit of an oil bath, believing it's something I've seen quite a lot, to be fair, with more mainstream movements. A lot of people, I think, seem to think along the lines of a little bit of oil will help everything move, but a little bit too much oil in a mechanical movement, which this side of it is all mechanical, will just hang things up and create a bunch of friction. Okay, so we can now lift away the date ring, the calendar ring. And that can sit over here. And interesting. Now that's actually quite nice to see. The calendar ring jumper is secured by a screw. It's not just on a post, because one of the problems when you've got something that's on a post and you have to fit a shepherd's crook spring and then fit the calendar ring and then a cover plate is, for anybody who knows, they can ping out and be a real nuisance. So it's actually quite nice to see that it's held in place by a screw. And again, it's got far too much oil on it, far too much. It's definitely been treated to an oil bath, without a shadow of a doubt. The quick change driving stars. both appear to be the same, but just to be on the safe side, I will wash them separately. It's time to dress my brass tweezers. So, our wheel, minute wheel, which again is caked in oil. Yeah, somebody really went to town on this one. Minute wheel, intermediate date wheel, cannon pinion. That's interesting cannon pinion. It's some kind of variant on a free cannon pinion with built-in tension on the sliding fingers there, kind of like an ETA system, very similar. Intermediate setting wheel, the day-date drive wheel, to making a note. Now that's interesting. Sorry about this, I just need to scoot off camera a minute to figure out. So that goes there like that. You can see again down here how caked this whole thing is with oil. So there's the base disc. I need to find some tissue. There is. This small finger here, which operates the date change. Again, greasy, as you can see, greasy residue. There's this finger, which operates the day change, the double finger. There's the securing screw. Where are we? And there's another plate which has pinged off and I need to find. So bear with me, we'll be right back. And in typical fashion, it was actually hiding in plain sight. It is right there, as hopefully you can see. It had just glued itself to the movement with the grease or oil. It's a thin plate with two little cutouts which locate into the notch, one of which locates into the notch on the wheel itself. So we're back round to the movement side, and I just want to show you this bit right here, which is at the side of where the battery goes, and I'm assuming that's remnants of previous battery corrosion, and it could well be that a battery has corroded in here in the past and a previous owner has sort of given it a good soaking in lubricants and a good prod and poke about until things started moving, which they were doing, they just weren't moving as they should. So that may be the case. So hopefully that's not something that's that's gone too far, transferred too far into the remainder of it. But what we're going to do just now is take out the pallets. Apologies, I completely forgot to press the record button again. What I was saying was, did I show the corrosion? Yes, I showed the corrosion. I was just removing the pallets, so it's just 2 screws for the pallet bridge, and all of the movement side ones appear to be brass. No, they're not. No, they're not. Ignore that. That's absolute nonsense, and they are not all brass coloured indeed. So, because you can see clearly that there are some silver-headed ones, but we have got an oil slicked pallet fork bridge. Very nice. And we have got a pallet fork. Now that looks like a delicate little fella. I'm going to zoom in and give you a close-up on this. So here's the pallet fork, and that's the tip of an oiler, a large oiler to be fair, just to give you an idea. But you can see, hopefully, that the pallet stones on this are actually really, really long compared to a traditional. They're very thin and very long pallet stones. This is the pallet fork as it came out of the movement. So flip that over, and you would normally have under here a guard pin which connects with the guard roller. So I've got this flower shaped battery contact here, which I believe should just here. That looks like it lifts off. It just needs persuading off the mount there. And it's got a little isolating plastic block under it. Maybe does the whole plastic thing come off? I think it might do. This is all really interesting because this is completely new to me. I've never so much as looked at an electronic watch before I recently bought the Elnix that I have, and of course my curiosity wanted to be able to strip the watch. As it turned out, the lovely fella that I bought mine from happened to have another couple of them, and this was one of them, which was running but very, very erratically. So it would run okay for a couple of seconds, and then it would go full steam ahead, and the seconds hand would go like the clappers, and then it would slow down a bit, and and it was all up and down and all over the place. But that's the flower shaped lower battery contact, and it's isolating plastic block just there. And directly underneath that, if I can lift this up, is this blue plastic sheet. And this, of course, is the isolating disc for the battery. Might be able to, there we go. And as you can see there, it's quite literally just a blue plastic sheet, and prevents the battery making contact with the brass of the plate, because if it did, of course, it wouldn't work. So just need to try and figure out which way that went in. Again, that wasn't coming out because, I don't know if you can see there, but again, soaked with oil, as you can see. Ah yes, so it's actually shaped, I see now. It's shaped in such a way, it's got a little tab, and that tab goes into there. So it's perfect shape to fit that tab, like so. And that, of course, will just wipe clean. but again it's another piece that's caked in oil. So it's a well preserved movement, well preserved. Yes. And it appears that we now only have one main bridge, because of course there's no barrel bridge, because there's no barrel. And that bridge is held, seemingly, by two screws, one of which also holds the sprung seconds pinion, which suggests that it's an indirect drive seconds pinion, in a mechanical movement at least, is what that would mean. Like the Miyota, for example, which are famous for their occasional erratic jumping seconds. So we've got that, we've got that, which is again caked in oil. We have got that. And then, oh, I missed a screw, we've got one over here. So this bridge is actually held by 3 screws. Like so. And the thing I've got to be careful of here is when I separate this bridge from the plate, is what is going to stick to it when I do so, because when you get movements that are caked in oil, and especially if it's a movement you're not overly familiar with, then wheels and things can stick to the heavily oil soaked parts, and that can be a real nuisance. It looks like we may have gotten away with that. I'm not sure, yeah, again we're caked in oil here, and I'm not sure if that's a little bit of corrosion or not. So let's zoom in on that. Here's the train bridge plate, and there's a bit of staining which may be corrosion on the lower part there, and you can see obviously a puddle of oil and the jewel there. And then if we look at the movement itself, and see what we have. Train time! Choo-choo! The escapement that I've just set back in its jewel here has a little spring coming out here, a little finger, and that acts on a ratchet, kind of like the automatic winding system of Seiko's, and I'm guessing that the purpose of that is to make sure it ratchets around that way, but cannot ratchet back the other way. And there you've got the very unusual escape wheel. I'll show a close-up of these wheels momentarily. At the moment, for now, I just want to get the train disassembled so that we can be down to the base movement and look at giving this all a clean. Of course, we've got the centre seconds, indirect centre seconds pinion, which again is caked in oil, which is no good whatsoever, because that needs minimal friction. It needs lubrication, but absolute minimal friction. Okay, and then we've got this plate here, the purpose of which I'm unsure. I'm just wondering about disassembling this now. Now there's a spring there which has definite ping potential, so that's something I will need to keep close. I only got 2 sort of brass headed screws by the look, which appear to hold this plate in place. So this spring, it did hook out, it will not hook back in. Looking at the shape of it, that's clearly got to be put in place first. So I need to figure out how that comes off. Sometimes you need to apply a little pressure to get things moving, but you never ever force something that does not seem to want to move. And this does not seem to want to come off that pivot. But it must be designed to do so, because if it didn't, it would be riveted and not screwed in place. There we go. There we go. It just needed a little bit of gentle persuasion. It has, again, gallons of oil underneath it. Something like this obviously would only require a small amount of lubrication on the pivot points. That's far too much oil. So. And this spring, just for sort of informational purposes, as it were, hooks in there like so, and clearly is fitted and removed. Come on now. It's clearly fitted and removed after removing that bit, like you can see there. So we've got two pingy springs so far. This bit here with the little click spring, I think I'm going to leave that in place. Right, what I'm going to do is scoot in now and give you a bit of a close-up. This whole thing's been a very unusual and different format for me. I've kind of done this on a rolling, sort of on the fly basis. Apologies to anyone if it's been a bit long-winded and waffling, but I kind of wanted to let you all see how it is for me when I approach a new and unfamiliar movement, as well as you know, rather than just seeing the remove part A from section B, insert tab B into slot A and all that kind of business. So it's apologies, as I say, if it's been a bit long-winded, this disassembly. All that's left now is the keyless works. I'm not going to bother filming that bit, because if you look at this, it is really par for the course. It's pretty much standard straightforward stuff. It has a couple of riveted wheels that you can see here, which are riveted in place. You can't move them, and these are for obviously the quick set and what have you. This bit does come off, and then these bits unbolt, which are your setting lever spring, your setting lever, etc, etc, and your yoke, and you've got your typical Seiko type spring up here for that. Here is this little tiny little spring, as you can see there, and I don't see any benefit to removing that for, sorry, I've gone out of frame. I don't see any benefit to removing that for the cleaning machine. I'm just going to leave that in place, refix the balance cock, and then clean that assembly as I would a normal one. And then other than that, as I say, is the dial side keyless works. To do the stem release, incidentally, on this one is like the 7019 type series. You can't see anything from the movement side under here. And what you have to do is pull the hands out to the setting position, and this tab then pops out of the edge at which point you can get your tweezers or a similar prodding tool and push this tab down to release the stem, like so. I just very quickly removed this to have a look, this one with the little spring, and underneath this brass piece here, which is kind of like an Etacron shaped adjuster, the spring is actually held into this brass stud with a blob of solder, and that's got high potential for disaster occurring trying to wash that separately, so I'm definitely leaving that in place. And it does have some fine adjustment. You can loosen this screw and slide the whole thing sort of side to side and back and forth a little bit to allow it to make suitable contact with the escape wheel pawl teeth. So there you go, interesting little aside on that one. And you know what, I've decided I am going to film the strip of the dial side keyless works, because I might as well. We've come this far, and you have hopefully stuck around and joined me on this adventure so far, so why not? In for a penny, as they say. Let's go for it. The setting lever is a pretty standard affair, caked with grease, as is the yoke, likewise caked with grease, and that's very kind of standard Seiko, but much thicker and better quality and shinier finished metal than you would normally see, which is interesting and nice. There we go, that's the that's that thing now, which we can now wiggle out free, like so, and wiggle away from. Now we're getting somewhere. Now we're cooking with gas, as they say. Come on. Yeah, I really need to dress my brass tweezers. They are not performing at their best. Okay, so this lever here has got some kind of little stop pin on the bottom. I wonder if that's for the balance. That might be the balance stop pin, actually. And again, caked, absolutely caked in oil. Crikey, the rate we're going, it's a good job this is not a live stream, because the US would be seeing this and invading. Apologies to any US viewers about that. Well, this is an awkward fellow. I wonder if I need to remove you. I've got a feeling, actually. Do you know what? This is one of those sudden dirt that was so obvious moments that's just literally just jumped at me. It is, of course, an eccentric screw with a flat side. So what we do is we rotate it so that the flat side is there, and we then are free to wiggle it off like so. What an idiot I am. Look at that. Honestly, that was just quite literally staring me in the face, and I just didn't see that. Honestly. As you can see, we've lost the clutch there. But that is not a problem. I'll just pop that back in. So we can see how he works. Yoinks. That's the clutch back in, and you can see it's got very obvious sort of like dog tooth castellations, kind of like a motorbike clutch, if you've ever seen the innards of one of those, rather than the typical ratchety type thing. Exactly the same principle, however. So of course at this point I can just pop out the stem and naturally the winding pinion, which of course it's not because it's not winding anything, is well and truly stuck in there with oil as well, just to be a bit different, you know. So, and the clutch there, like so, thank you very much. And the stem, marvellous. So we are down to a base plate, as base a base plate as can be. And the only things I will be leaving on are, does that come off? Let me have a look. Or is that fixed in place? Are you riveted or do you come off? Apologies for seemingly talking to myself. I'm actually talking to the watch, and you find that you wind up doing silly things like this when you work on these things, and that does come off. That does come off indeed. Hello. Well, hello there. Okay, so this plate, oops, which I've just dropped, and thankfully is not drastically important with regards to dropping. This plate sits on there like so, and this actually comes off. I'm not sure why that is. Maybe it was just a simplification of the machining process, but it comes off, so we will remove it. Okay, and there we are. However, I've got a funny feeling that that is where the balance cock goes, so I will need to reassemble that, thinking about it logically, because I will want to refit the balance cock for cleaning in the cleaning machine. But before I do that, I will need to do a little bit of hairspring work. So I shall have to pop this fellow out. Thankfully it's a standard screw type. Standard screw type, yes, that's where the balance cock goes. Okay, so that was obviously to allow clearance and all that jazz. So yeah, that's going to be refitted thusly for reasons of cleaning in the cleaning machine, to keep everything in place. And obviously that is needed because hopefully you can see the whole assembly is considerably thicker than a standard balance wheel setup, because you've got the double wheel system there. So got a few hairs in here as well, in amongst the oil. So that's going to go into the cleaner like that. I first need to do some hairspring work, and I need to get this a bit further over there and looking like it should. And I think we've got a bend in there as well, so that's going to be fun. That's going to be fun, and there's not a vast amount of clearance on this one either. We'll see how that goes. We'll see how that goes. Hopefully I'll just be able to pop the hairspring off like a standard setup. And then that's the disassembly of the Seiko Elnix. What I'm going to do just now, as a sort of final bit, is show you some of these wheels in close-up. So this wheel is the large one, which has a sort of a weight, a cup underneath it, and I'm guessing that this is kind of the equivalent of the second wheel, which would be driven by the barrel, and this is the one that also goes into the jeweled plate on the dial side. So you can see that's got much larger pivots, much thicker pivots than the other wheels. And we've then got this, which would presumably be the third wheel, which is pretty par for the course for any mechanical watch that you would see. We then have this tiny, whoops, fourth wheel, seconds hand, and everything's sticking to the wheel. And then we have the quirky, strange escape wheel, which, as said, looks a bit like. In fact, have you seen Octopussy? You know the guy with the yo-yo that tries to slice Bond and Maud Adams to pieces from the balcony. It sort of looks a bit like that, but in miniature. So there we go, with its sort of pole wheel tooth bit. Okay. The pallet fork I showed you, yep, I did, and this is the train wheel bridge with sort of some gunk, some possible corrosion. I'll not know until that's cleaned up, and lots of oil. And is there anything else that I need to show you there? I think that about covers it. So what I'm going to do, this is going to be a little bit awkward. You'll have to sort of bear with me here, because I'm going to have to sweep all my tools off my mat, and I'm going to try and pan the contents of my mat across the screen and hope that I don't send any of these bits flying. That could be fun, so do bear with me, please. So we've got the lovely dial, and look at the pattern on that, it's beautiful. Really, really nice. So once this has got a new crystal, that will make a world of difference. Hands and bits and bobs there, but we're not bothered about those. So we've got the battery strap connector, and we've got this little sprung lever. We've got the circuit board. We've got the coil that's the filling of the balance wheel sandwich. We have got the dial side day jumper and its 4 screws, the date jumper, its shepherd's crook spring, this plate which acts as a guard plate for the calendar wheel and also has a jewel in for that second wheel, I'm assuming it is. We've got the date change components and the securing screw. We've got the 2 star wheels, which do look identical, but I am going to keep those separate. The top one is the top one on the dial, the bottom one is the bottom one. And then hour wheel, minute wheel, cannon pinion, and intermediate setting wheel. We've then got the pallet bridge, pallet fork, the battery connector. We have got the 3 screws and the sprung retainer for the seconds pivot. We've then got the wheels of the train bridge, and sorry, this is getting a little bit awkward, the train bridge, and we have got, what was it? Oh, this piece was on top of the train bridge and has that spring which is just below it there. And then next to that, of course, we've got the keyless works. So just in a slightly larger view, you can see all the components there. Of course, the battery isolator, plastic sheet as well. So not as many components as I would have personally expected, but a good selection. So thank you for joining me on this this little adventure. I do hope it hasn't been horribly long and too waffly for you. And join us for the next exciting episode of How Does This Go Back Together Again. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next one.